Tonight, we are going to be engaging in a very important dialogue as we examine the teachings of the Masonic Lodge. Let me remind you that this is a pretty new area for me in terms of my research. It's not a topic that I have done a lot of research on. So I have learned a lot of things which I believe you might be in the process of learning tonight. So we're all going to learn together and discuss and share together, and that we will gather important information that will help us in our decision-making process when it comes to our involvement in such an activity, because we have to be sure of what we are engaging ourselves in, and we have to be aware of things that we must know as Christians, because the reality is that there's a large percentage of Christians and religious leaders as well that are involved in Freemasonry. And obviously, we are going to be examining whether or not Christians should be involved in these fraternities. So we are going to be involved in a lot of details about the lodge. I've tried to summarize a lot of them because there's a whole lot of information. And assisting me tonight is going to be Dr. Aline. She's going to be scrolling our slides for us, which will bring up some specific facts about Freemasonry. I've tried to make them as brief as possible because there's a lot of information, and I don't want to try to bore you with too much information. You have to read it on screen. So as we go through the points, which will be identified as important facts about Freemasonry, I will read the specific things identified, and what I will do then is expand on them and give you some more information that is necessary. So these facts would engage us in a number of things that are very much connected to Freemasonry. So we're going to look at a brief history, not very much detail. We're going to also look at the structure of the lodge, how they are organized. We look at some of the beliefs, the rituals, and the oaths. And we're going to look at the influence globally and even locally, because the lodges have tremendous influence worldwide. We're going to examine that as well and see what concerns governments have in how they operate in their countries and some of the issues that might be associated with the practice of Freemasonry. So there are a lot of details that we will have to be dealing with. And as I said, we're going to summarize these details that you try to get the main points. But in all the information that we are learning, we're going to be focused on whether or not Christians should be involved in Freemasonry. In other words, is it compatible with Christianity? Because there are a lot of things that are said positively about Freemasonry, and we will see when people are introducing you to Freemasonry, some of the things that you're actually told. And when you identify the principles that they have established, they seem very Christian, very noble. For example, they have 4 main principles that they identify as part of the movement. It's integrity, it's friendship, it's respect, and it's charity. All noble things. And they will point to the Bible and say, well, the Bible highlights all of these things. And I will go to the first century church and show you how they were about charity, how they were about brotherhood and loving relationships, how they looked out for each other, and they had respect for each other, and they treated each other in a friendly way. And they will tell you up front that Freemasons are all about those noble things. And they don't see why we should have a problem with it. It is very compatible with Christianity. They will tell you they use the Bible, they say prayers, they have sessions that would involve things that we would consider as forms of worship. And therefore, they will try to justify what they're introducing you to. But as Christians, we must be aware that the Bible warns us not to be deceived. And there is a lot of deception that is in our world, and it comes very, very disguised because deception won't set up like rain. And very often things are very well quoted and presented in a beautiful way. It's like a cake that is well presented and looks very beautiful on the outside, but it has some poison on the inside which you can't see. And when you bite into it, then you have serious problems. That's how deception operates. So we have to examine things very carefully, and that's what we hope to be doing, especially when we come to look at their rituals and their belief systems. That will come more in the second session. So you would need to be bringing your Bibles for that session, because we're going to be looking at what the Bible says in contrast to what they present as part of their belief system. Now, what we must also pay attention to is that they identify some of the tenets of a cult. And I'm not going to be saying that Freemasonry is a cult. As a matter of fact, we are trying not to call out different religious groups as cults, but if we see tenets that are identified as traits that are presented by cults, we will identify them. And again, we said when you have leaders that are revered and are lifted up, and you are governed by their philosophy, their belief system, and they impact on you significantly to the extent that they override the Bible in many cases, then that is one of the things which identifies one of the marks of being a cult. And Freemasonry has persons that are classified in that sort of grouping as people that they revere, they hold in high esteem, and they are very much connected to their philosophies and their teachings and their belief systems, which they superimpose on persons that belong to the lodge. And as we look at the definition, we will identify one of these persons, and that's why I am using the definition that he gives, so that you are clearly understanding that this is what they are projecting from one of the persons that they hold in high esteem and put trust and confidence in his worldview, his belief system, his philosophy. And that's why we have to pay very careful attention to the influence that these particular individuals have over the persons that are part of a lodge. And what I want us to bear in mind that we're going to look at the lodge or Freemasonry on an international scale, but we're also going to look at it locally. And what I want us to be is to be very circumspect when we come to the local situation. And there are people who may not have been identified in public as lodge members. And therefore, we're going to avoid using those names or calling names of people that might be lodge members, but they have not publicly identified that they are. Now, there are some people on the national scale that have actually come out and identified their association with lodges, and it's public. So some of those names will be mentioned. But as I said, they want us to be very circumspect unless we have public identity of these persons. We would try to avoid as much as possible of using their names or even using church groups that might be associated with the movement unless, as they say, it's public information that is already there. All right, so we want to be very careful. So we're going to start off by looking at a definition, so you can see very clearly how nicely they present what they are about, so that you can see the aim is to attract you to it, and we're going to give some thought to why is it that Christians are so attracted to the lodge. And maybe when you look at the definition and you see, as I said, how they put out their principles, then you would see why many Christians will get involved. So we're going to look at the definition for Albert Pike. And Albert Pike defines Freemasonry as a spiritual and philosophical endeavor for self-improvement. It's a continuous struggle of the spiritual against the material, and it means to combat intolerance and vice through morality, charity, and pursuit of knowledge. It is a system of allegories and rituals designed to elevate the human spirit and cultivate virtue. So we're just going to pause there for a while. All right, now looking at that from the surface, there seem to be some very noble things. It's an endeavor for self-improvement. When we come to look in depth at how they view this self-improvement, how you're going to accomplish it, we're going to see where it conflicts with the Bible. I'm not going to go into those details tonight, but as I said, when we begin to look at their belief system, and things that they actually teach, when you get into the lodge and you're exposed to these things and you are already into it, then you realize that you are in something that really does not match with Christianity. It says there's a struggle between the spiritual and the material. We are dealing with that as Christians. There's a battle between the flesh and the spirit. And Freemasons are telling you that they are giving you the knowledge and the light that helps you to improve yourself and be able to overcome the darkness that is in the world through the light that they give you, through knowledge and through the things that they teach you. Okay? And they will say that they use allegories and rituals, and those are all designed to cultivate virtue and they have to develop your spirit. And they will say that they use these allegories and these symbols because in the very beginning of Freemasonry, a lot of people who might not have been well educated were able to learn better through the symbols that they were able to use and to explain how the virtues that they want to develop are attached to these symbols. Good. So you get an idea there then that on the surface, it seems like a very noble institution, a very noble organization, or a very noble system. And from looking at that, they will convince you that they, are very genuine about developing people morally and encouraging virtues. They said Freemasonry is about taking a good man and making him a better man. And we will see how that matches up with the Bible, because the Bible says that there's no one good. And we are born in sin and shaping in iniquity. So as far as the Christian perspective, is not taking a good person and making them better. Christ takes a sinner and makes him righteous. He's born in sin and shaping iniquity. But they are saying that everybody has the potential to develop the light that is already in them. And it is just a progression from being good to being better. It's a progression of self-improvement and self-development. And so you will see later down, bring these things to you that you can give some thought to them. And in your own private research, you can check some of these things out as we identify what their tenets are. So this is Albert Pike, and he is one of the persons that are very highly esteemed, a very eminent Mason of past. And his book, Morals and Dogma, which he wrote, contains a whole lot of philosophy, a whole lot of belief systems that, as I said, that are given over to the lodges. And he's the person that they said that his writings are almost considered as the Bible of Freemasonry. Along with him, because not only just one person, you have another guy by the name of Albert Mackey who wrote the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. And then you also have Manly P. Hall, who wrote A Bridge to Light. So these are very revered persons, and their teachings are very much embraced in Freemasonry and taught to people as they enter in to Freemasonry. Now, Charles Finney, I guess many of you might have heard of him. He was a very eminent evangelist, born in 1792 and died in 1875. And he was considered the father of the evangelistic outreach in the United States. And it is said that his preaching led about 500,000 people to Christ. And he was a Freemason, but he was a Freemason before he became a Christian. And I think it was at the age of 21 that he became a Freemason, and he stayed in it for 4 years, and he reached the level of a Master Mason. But then he accepted Christ, and he became uncomfortable. See, so we're looking at the compatibility of Christianity with Freemasonry. He was introduced to it by a relative, but when he became converted, he turned to Christ. He was troubled in his spirit. And he said that he was in a lodge where there were no Christians. And as a matter of fact, he says they talk about making good men better. He said there were some very vile people, very profane people in the lodge that he was part of. So this whole concept of taking good men and making them better did not really apply to the lodge that he was in. And when he became a Christian and they found out that he was a Christian, he said the meeting that he went to. Then after he accepted Christ, he still went to the meeting, and they asked him to pray because they found out that he had made a decision to become a Christian. He prayed at the beginning of the meeting, and he prayed at the end of the meeting. But he said he felt so uncomfortable in his spirit because there was a different spirit now operating in him. And he could no longer continue in that. And he exited from the lodge. He did not go back. And he wrote a book, and he wrote a number of articles condemning Freemasonry. And he said he could have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness. That's how he saw it as a Christian. And he's quoting what the Bible says about it. So the question is, what is there that is so attractive to Freemasonry that so many Christians get involved? When we look at some statistics as we go down through the points, you will understand what I'm talking about. And it is very, very, very concerning because a lot of leaders are attached. A lot of churches are, lenient with lodges participating in activities in their church and having services in the church and things of that nature. And so that's, I said, what I said is what we are going to be mainly examining. Why is it that Christians might be so involved? Some Christians say that they don't believe a lot of the things that are taught by Freemasons. They only embrace the good things that they talk about, like the integrity, the friendship, the respect, charity, etc. But remember, I told you that very often deception comes with a very beautiful coating on the surface. And that could be a compromised position when you are saying, well, I don't believe some of the things that they're teaching. So I am in the lodge, but I am not of the lodge. I don't believe a lot of those things that they're teaching that I find that are conflicting with Christianity. But that's a problem because, as Charles Finney said, you are joining yourself with unfruitful works of darkness, and that is going to be a problem. All right. So let's go on to some of the points here that I have. The next one, we are looking at the important facts about Freemasonry. Freemasonry is a formal organization which began in the formation of the Grand Lodge of England in 1717. It was introduced to Barbados in 1740 by Alexander Irvine. It operates in the island under three main authorities, namely the Grand District Grand Lodge of Scotland, the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of the Caribbean, and the District Grand Lodge of Barbados. All right, so those are just what you call jurisdictions, and a Grand Lodge is a lodge that is responsible for a number of lodges. For example, the District Grand Lodge of Scotland in Barbados is responsible for 6 lodges. The Prince Hall Grand Lodge is responsible for 5 lodges. And then there is the District Grand Lodge of Barbados, which is responsible for another 6 lodges. And then there is a level above that, which I will explain when we look at the structure, because remember we said we're going to look at the structure of the lodge. So you have what you call craft lodges, which are British, is a British terminology. And then you have what you call the blue lodges, which is an American definition. And the craft lodge and the blue lodge are the stages at which every Mason begins. And that's why I'm going to show you some of the things that are important in joining Freemasonry, which we will have a little video presentation that will come soon, shortly. All right? So everybody has to pass through those 3 stages. All right? And you have what you call the entered apprentice, the fellow craft, and the master mason. Those are 3 degrees that all Masons have to pass through as you enter a lodge. Every Mason becoming a Mason, don't care wherever you are in society, you have to pass through those stages, and you get 3 degrees, and you become a Master Mason. Now, to move from there, you have to go into another jurisdiction, which I will explain a little later, which will move you on to higher degrees. But they say that 80% of the persons who enter the lodge remain at that 3rd degree, which is the Master Mason. And therefore, you can understand why a lot of persons in Freemasonry don't understand the deeper, more sinister rituals and belief systems, because unless you go past that third degree, there are a lot of things that you are not told, and they deliberately keep them from you. So even in the lodge, there are secrets kept from individuals in the lodge because they claim that they are not the level to receive these things. They're not considered as adept or considered as sages, and that's why they do not get to understand the depth, and they feel comfortable because a lot, as I said, the deeper things that are really questionable, they might not get to be aware of these things because they don't go past the third degree. And you can go in some of the organizations up to the 33rd degree. And that's why you will hear about a 33rd degree Mason, because you can go much further than the initial three degrees. We said it was formally established in England in 1717, but prior to that, there were a number of groups that sprung across Europe. So you had a very simple beginning historically to the formation of lodges. And what would happen is that these craft masons, these skilled masons would move around Europe building cathedrals and magnificent structures because they were very skilled. And the concept of free came because you had to be a free person. In other words, you could not be a slave and be traveling with these skilled masons across Europe building these structures. All right, so that's where the concept of free comes in. So you're in a Freemason. Also, free comes in from the aspect of that to be able to move across Europe, it was mostly given to people who were single, not married, and had commitments, because that would limit the amount of traveling that they could do. So you had to be free from certain ties. So that's the concept of free coming in there again. And then there's a third way in which you get the classification of free, in that they use a special type of stone that were used in decoration of these magnificent buildings, and it was called free stone. And so the skilled masons that were involved in the use of this material, again, would carry the title Freemason. So those are three ways in which you will get the term. So that's how you had Freemason. So they were actually Masons when they started. And what would happen is that on the big construction sites, they would set up little lodges for men to communicate after a hard day's work. So they would meet and play games and drink and talk together and discuss things about the craft. And that sort of build up a brotherhood and a relationship, which, formalized itself into what we would call a lodge. And then there were some people who wanted to get into it and sometimes break it up. And they will have certain signs that you would have to be able to give to be able to get into the lodge. So it started from there. And if you could not produce these signs, you were not able to get in, so that they were excluding certain people who were trying to become part of the lodge. But afterwards, it developed into something more formal. And then in England, in 1717, 4 lodges that were established then united and formed one Grand Lodge, and they call that the Grand Lodge of England. And that became the overarching or the umbrella oversight for a lot of the lodges then that developed afterwards in the United States and in the Commonwealth. And obviously you will see that we would have been introduced to it because we would have been part of the British Commonwealth as a colony. And so it was introduced to Barbados in 1740. All right, so I could read the point 2 here. I just give you a little detail of it. Freemasonry began as a stonemason mutual benefit society, and like an elite club of Masons, they will share. Yes, please. Oh, sorry, I thought somebody was saying something. Right, so it began, to protect the trade of each other, and also, help to provide jobs for people who were out of work as Masons. But later, as a way of generating more funds and to increase influence, these societies began to let in members who were not actually stonemasons. And modern lodges are made up now of lawyers, doctors, politicians, priests, actors, popular musicians, wealthy businessmen, sports icons. So originally the laws was made up of masons, and you would have called them operative masons. They were actually masons. But as the formal organization took place, and they wanted to build prestige and influence, and also develop in ways that they will have finance to make the lodge become more expansive, they started to include people from all walks of life, and it became a very, very elite organization, and that is what it mainly is today. A lot of the people who are part of lodges today are not really actually Masons. So they are called accepted or speculative Masons. So most of the people involved in lodges today are speculative or accepted Masons, which means they're not really involved in the stone Mason work as they originally were. And that's what it is really like today. So in the United States, where it first was established, there are about 250,000 Masons in England. And it is said that in the UK, 2/3 of the judges and lawyers are Masons, and half of the police force. So you see now we're talking about influence, how powerful these organizations become. And a little later down, we'll begin to discuss some of the things that are associated with Freemasonry and some of the problems that they get. We could see why we would have issues like those when judges are involved, police officers are involved, lawyers are involved, and I'm not going to go into any details here. That we'll learn more about that from investigative journalism that has been done by people who were part of the lodge, came out, and then began to look at it a little closer and realize some of the corruption that would have been involved in it. And we're not saying that in all cases and in all lodges you will get that. But when you look at the influence and the power that they have, you will understand what we're talking about. In United States, there are about 2 million Masons, and across the world, globally, there are about 6 million. So you can see it's very big in the United States and in England. And the troubling thing is that they say about 500,000 persons in the United States, including leaders and Christians and religious organizations, are part of Freemasonry. It involves a whole lot of Christians, and this is what is the worrying thing. And you see, it is troubling when you say, "But I don't believe what they're teaching," and that's where the compromise come in, because it's, for example, say, "But I don't believe in Santa Claus, but I am still going to wear a Santa Claus hat, and I'm going to wear the reindeer horns," and you are aligning yourself with something that you say you don't believe in. Or I, for example, might not believe in the date that Jesus was born, 25th of December. I'm going to celebrate it nonetheless, and I'm going to connect myself to rituals that are associated with things that I might not believe that the Bible support, but it's part of a tradition, and I can work with it because in essence, I don't really see myself committing anything that is of really serious sinful nature. All right, just to give you some well-known persons, and just a cross section of people. This is my third point, that you can get an idea of people who were involved. And as I said, I'm using these names now because these are people who are identified as Freemasons, and it was public. Some of them are past, some of them are still alive. Some well-known persons identified as Freemasons are George Washington, and you will see George Washington's picture in many of the lodges because he is highly esteemed. And there were about 13 other United States presidents that were involved in Freemasonry. So was Sir Winston Churchill, John Wayne, Mozart, Beethoven, Henry Ford, Joseph Smith of the Mormons. And again, when you go into Utah, which is the Mormon capital, you will find that there are a lot of people who are Freemasons because Joseph Smith was a 33-degree Freemason, and he introduced a lot of the Mormons into Freemasonry, and it was accepted because, again, he was a very influential person, and they followed a lot of his teachings and his philosophy and his belief system. Reverend Al Sharpton, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Nat King Cole, Louis Armstrong, So you see, I'm using musicians, I'm using politicians, legislators, president, but you can go on, astronauts, doctors, lawyers, in a whole lot of ways. You have a picture there of the regalia that they have. Thank you for bringing that up, Doctor. You can see how immaculately they are dressed and how they're cladded. And they say that as it developed and more elite persons became part of Freemasonry, that was a way of eliminating sort of the poor section of the people because it became a sort of expensive connection in terms of how you had to present yourself. And you see how stately they look. And you will see that they are wearing the apron because that's one of the important symbols of Freemasonry. And when you come into the Blue Lodge or the Craft Lodge, which I said are the beginning lodges, after you are entered into it, you will get your apron. The ring comes a little later. So you can move from the apprentice mason, which is the beginning stage, to a master mason within maybe 6 months, a year or so, depending on how well you are learned and how you progress. Some people can progress faster than others, but you can get to the third degree and you will get your ring at that stage. If you want your ring before, you can purchase your ring. And the ring will contain some of the basic symbols that you will identify that are part of the lodge. Now, the interesting thing is, I say that a lot of Christians are involved in the lodge, but it has been banned in Saudi Arabia, and it has been banned in many of the Arab countries, except Lebanon and Morocco. And what they're doing now on the website, they're advising people if you're going to any of the Arab countries, avoid using your ring or your badges or any of the regalia that will identify you with a lodge because it's illegal in some of those places. In Italy, it was banned by Mussolini because he thought I had deep connection to the mafia. Okay, so we are saying that there are some sinister things that governments have had to deal with, and this is why it is not as simple as people sometimes see at the surface. And when you get a deeper understanding, you have to learn from upfront what you're getting into. So my aim here is, if you are a Christian, don't join the lodge. And if you're already in the lodge and you are a Christian, you should be looking to get out of the lodge. And we're going to see more of that in a deeper way when we begin to examine what the Bible does actually teach against some of the things that they're teaching. Okay? So my fifth point, the standard symbols of Freemasonry are the square and the compass, which you will see there in the picture presented, the square and the compasses. And in the beginning of Freemasonry, as I said, where many of the Masons could not read well, the symbols serve to remind the members of the fraternity's teaching. So the square symbolizes honesty and fairness, the compass, self-restraint, and living a balanced life. And the apron symbolizes innocence and honorable labor. You see, and they're using symbols that were attached to masonry. They had the apron to carry some of the tools that they were using or things that they will be operating with. They had the compass in drawing their circles, and they had the square in lining up things. So they're using actual Mason symbols to do a lot of their teaching. But of course, these are main symbols, but they have a host of other symbols, including the coffin. They even use some of the biblical symbols, again, to draw Christians into it. They have the Ark of the Covenant as a symbol. They have Jacob's ladder as a symbol, which represents the different stages that you climb as you go up in the lodge. Okay? And they have, a whole set of things that might appear to be all right and to be Christian. And so a lot of Christians would be inclined to feel, well, I don't really see anything wrong with this because these Masons are doing things that are good. All right, we can pick up point 6. Alicia? Right. Freemasonry is the largest secret society in the world. It is known for its strange initiation ceremonies, which we will get a chance to look at, its secret signs and handshakes by which members recognize each other. Handshakes vary according to the rank, degree of the individual Mason, the rank of the Masonic ring, as well as various badges and symbols of identification. So you will notice that when you were looking at the aprons had different things on them. So as you progress in Freemasonry, you get badges that become part of your uniform, and they're attached to your apron or attached to your uniform. And when you enter the Craft Lodge or the Blue Lodge, you are taught these different things, so that if you don't have the ring or you don't have one of the regalia, people can still identify you as a Mason by your handshake or by certain signs that you make. And these signs are connected to some of the rituals they go through, which when we come to rituals, we will look at. And some of the handshakes are also able to identify the fact that you are a lodge member, and it tells you which level you are at. Whether you're at the first degree, which is the apprentice degree, or whether you're at the second degree, which is the craft or the fellow craft degree, or whether you are at the third degree, which is the Grand Mason. Okay, so the handshake would indicate that. So when you are shaking a person's hand, just to give it a little clue, and you are an apprentice, you will use your thumb and put it over the first knuckle on his finger, and that indicates you are the first degree Mason. You use the thumb for the second knuckle to indicate that you are second degree Mason, and you put your thumb on the third knuckle to indicate that you are the third degree Mason. So you are Master Mason. So they use those to identify. And you can be in the presence of certain people, and you identify that you're a Mason, and you already make a connection. And we will come to see the importance of these connections. And then I will also introduce you to some other signs that are used to indicate that when you are in need of help and you want a Mason to come to your rescue, there's a certain sign that you can make, and wherever that Mason is, he is expected to come to your rescue. There is strong brotherhood among the Freemasons, and that's why the rationale for why you enter the lodge is very important. And I think that some Christians get ensnared in terms of why they're going into the lodge. Okay, now I will just go through before I finish that point there, some things that people think about in terms of joining the lodge. Right, you want to do good
Reverend
deeds?
Jackman?
Yes, please.
I was writing down the emblems that you went through before. I only got the body compass stands for the
Oh,
self-restraint. Just,
okay,
yeah,
okay.
sorry.
Right, so the compass stands for self-restraint and living a balanced life. Right, it also represents your sphere, because when you draw a circle, you draw the circle with the compass, and that circle represents your sphere of influence. The square symbolizes honesty and fairness. They talk about squaring your behavior with what is appropriate. So it is honesty and fairness. And the apron symbolizes purity, innocence, and honorable labor. Honorable labor, because most of the Masons used to carry an apron. And I forget to mention the G, which comes in the center of that symbol, which you would have seen when Dr. Eileen brought up
What?
the
Sorry.
pictures there. A G, there's a G, and that G represents the grand architect. That G represents the grand architect of the universe. That's how they refer to God as the grand architect of the universe. So that's why it is universal for them. So you could be a Hindu, a Buddhist, a Muslim, a Christian. They just want you to believe in a deity. Is any deity. We're
And
going to
any
come to
deity
discuss that. Any
that you
deity wants
choose.
you, that you choose.
Yes. Okay,
And
thank
and,
you.
and they and they claim that that's where they beat Christianity, because they embrace everybody and you have no problem. So when you're in a lodge, you don't discuss your religious connection, because everybody comes under one heading, and we are
Mm.
subject to the grand architect of the universe. So that's what that G stands for. Okay, so we're going on well, right? So number 7, come to that point. The God of the Masonic Lodge is referred to as the grand architect of the universe. Anyone becoming a Mason must believe in a deity. So you will hear, if you were following the information that we were recently seeing in the nation, they said, but people think that we are evil, we are satanic, but we believe in God. We are about brotherhood. We are about proper relationships. We are about helping people. Yes, those are very surface things and they're very good and noble, but that's not all there is to a lodge. That's not all there is to Freemasonry. There are other things that you must swear to and things that you must believe. And some of those things I'm going to draw to your attention that, as I say, if you have the inclination because you are attracted to the lodge, you should think about it very, very much. So some people say I became a Mason because I had a relative that was a Mason and introduced me to Masonry. That's what happened to Charles Finney. He had a relative that introduced him to Freemasonry. They say to do good deeds for my fellow man, very noble. This is one that's important. A lot of people to claim the social and business ladder. And when you understand how Freemasons operate, they look out for each other. And as I said, when they started to inform you of some of the things that came out in investigative journalism, where people are favored, where people get off having committed crimes because the judge that they were dealing with threw out cases and things like that, where information is hidden because it was realized that a person was part of a lodge and information is covered up by police. All of those things go on because you are sworn to protect the person that is a lodge member, as long as it doesn't cause you any harm to your own life. You must come to the rescue of the Freemason and you must defend him unless he's charged for treason or murder. All right. But to claim the social ladder, people get promotions, people get hired to positions that other people should get, but they're Freemasons. And so they bypass people, even in interviews that should get the job. They get it because of their Freemason attachment. These are things that are real. Some say to learn the secrets, mystery knowledge, and to get an advantage in the world. To achieve salvation and spiritual success without going to church. That's what some people say was their reason for joining Masonry, because it's a spiritual thing and they don't have to go to church, and it's about self-improvement and self-development. And the mission tell you can be saved even without having to accept Christ as your Savior. Your good works will bring you salvation. To learn how to become a better man, you get that in Christ. And some say just to get away and spend time with the boys. There was a pastor who was introduced to a church that he had to minister to, and he thought there were some Masons in the church, and when he interviewed them, they were soldiers. And he asked them why they joined the lodge, and they said, well, when they were in the army, the fellowship of men, the camaraderie that they had as soldiers together meant a lot to them. And so now they were no longer in the army. The best way they could find that camaraderie and that fellowship and that bonding was in the lodge. And that's where they joined the lodge. So you see, this will speak to us as a church that we realize that men would want to bond with men and they're attracted to men. And that's why you must pay a whole lot of attention to our men fellowship, because the lodge is attracting thousands and thousands of them and leading them astray. And even as the Bible says, if God doesn't shorten the days, the very elect shall be deceived. As I said, it's astounding why the Arabs are banning Freemasonry, making it illegal, and Christians are opening up to it, and Christian societies, of course, there are some of them are coming out against it. The Catholic have long ago established a ban on Freemasonry. They said it's evil, and they say that you should not be even allowed to take communion. That was Pope John Paul, if you are a Freemason. Okay, and there are a lot of other groups that came out against it. The Nazarene have a position on it, the Assemblies of God, the Methodists, even the Brethren. They have established positions, and that's why I say it's important for us to know what we believe, what we stand for, that we too can establish positions on certain issues to guard our people. It's our responsibility to guard our people against a lot of darkness that comes disguised as light. That's what Finney said. It's darkness disguised as light. All right, so it was at 7. The God of Masonic Lodge referred to as the grand architect of the universe. Anyone becoming a Mason must believe in a deity. No professed atheists are allowed in the lodge. Interesting. You cannot be an atheist once they know it and join the lodge. You have to have a deity. The problem is you can have any deity that suits you, because according to their concept, the grand architect of the universe manifests himself in all different ways in all different religions. And so the God of the Bible is not exclusive. God comes manifested in different ways. So he could be Ra, he could be Baal, he could be Osiris, he could be any of the gods that you worship. And once you believe strong enough and you are sincere in your belief, the Masons accept that. Okay, and so in the lodge you are told don't not discuss your religion and question anybody else's religion. So Masons accept belief in Baal, Allah, Ra, Buddha, Jehovah, Vishnu, Krishna, Jesus, and even Lucifer. Because when you start to go up in higher degrees, they start to invoke things that are connected to your cult, and Lucifer comes in. Because as far as they're concerned, he is the person who has light, that his name bears light. Remember, the Masons are about transferring you from darkness to light, and their concept of darkness is different. Okay, we will get into those things. Now, I should say that we have agreed that we will go from 7 to 8:30. So I will soon pause and give you a chance to start to ask some questions or make some comments or things that you might have discovered in your own research or anything that you want to explain. And remember, I said I don't have all the answers because the research is new to me. Yes, I was exposed to a lot of information as I was doing my research over the last couple of months. But I don't think I have all the answers, and we are learning together. So you will bear with me even if I cannot supply an answer at this point in time. The Masonic Lodge ritual, in reality, attempt to bundle the true God of the Bible together with many false gods in a grand, all-embracing figure who belongs to all. This theology is called synchronism. That is, all roads lead to God. You hear people say that. So all religions are accepted. Everybody can get to heaven. Everybody can be saved. The Freemasons believe that. Members are encouraged to believe in God, but interpretation is left to the individual. Point number 8. Masonry is really a successor of the ancient mystery religions of Babylon, Greece, Egypt, and involved Gnosticism. As I said, as we go a little deeper in the religious aspect, I will explain some of those things to you, but it has connections to those things, right? And we are warned in the Bible about connections to pagan and mystery religions. And the Bible speaks very much against Gnosticism, okay? And what Masons are telling you is that the light is inside of you. It just has to be developed. And you develop it when you come to be a Freemason, because we expose you to knowledge. So they ask you to forget all the knowledge you come in with from your own Christian background and the information you have received. You have to renounce all of that and open yourself now to the light that they're giving you to develop you to the level that you need to develop. So you can start in your mind be questioning, why would Christians be supportive of that? The mystery religions taught a cult philosophy of life, such as reincarnation, and a method where a higher consciousness could be obtained. So you can aspire to become even godlike from within your own self and not necessarily having a connection to Christ. Now, point number 9, Freemasonry denies the Trinity, the deity of Christ, salvation by grace through faith, and the uniqueness of the Bible. Masons also promote involvement with the occult as a means of achieving degrees of truth. We will expand on those next week when we come to the deeper things, now looking at what the Bible says against what Freemason says. Freemasonry, point number 10, is an international benevolent fraternity whose members are patriotic and heavily involved in charity. That's why they're so attractive. They place strong emphasis on the brotherhood of man and establish retirement homes, hospitals, study grant for young people, sponsorship of charitable causes. Organizations founded and supported by Freemasons include YMCA, Rotary International, Lions, Alcoholics Anonymous. All of those are, some of those were founded, but they are all supported in large ways by Freemasonry. In the US, it is said that Masons contribute $2.6 million per day to charities, which is about $1 billion annually. Imagine that. So you can understand why the fraternity wants to attract doctors and lawyers and businessmen and politicians, people with not just only influence, but with money, because they're going to get themselves involved in a lot of in organizations internationally, and they're going to be able to influence a lot of people. They support their own. If a Mason dies, his wife, the widow, is supported by the Masons. The Rhodes Scholarship that many people in the world benefit from was named after the Freemason Rhodes. He was a Freemason, and they were very much involved in educating people, and that's where the Rhodes Scholarship would have come from. And so you can see the influence that Freemasonry has and why it be so attractive and all over the world. And when we come locally in Barbados, we will see that the Freemasons have their hands in a whole lot of things, and they have their influence in a whole lot of things. But they say we will not be calling any names on this platform. We are going to be very circumspect, but we will be dealing in general terms. 11.11, Freemasonry claims that it is not a religion because they don't have worship services, yet they have all the features of a deeply religious organization. Their meeting place is called a temple. They have an altar. They have a sacred book or sacred books, depending on where you are. Prayers are spoken by a chaplain. Rituals are performed. And there is the belief in some God, which is required. So it have tenets of religion, even though they say they're not a religion. They are a benevolent society. They are a fraternity that is interested in brotherhood and friendship and developing men, and so on. Freemasons are commanded not to testify truthfully when another Mason is on trial. Since this works, they admit that it might be perjury, but it is a far greater sin not to protect one of their own than lying. It is claimed that even during the American Civil War, soldiers showed loyalty to identified Freemasons. You can imagine that. You're in a civil war. The North is against the South. People are fighting to kill one another. But once you can identify a Freemason, even from the opposing forces, you are supposed to treat that person completely different. That's the sort of bonding they have. And you can see how deep that can go then when it comes, as I said, to going as far as being involved in corruption. Point number 13, Freemasonry has never had one authoritative leader, meaning that the Anglicans have a bishop and the Catholics have a pope. Freemasons don't have an authoritative leader like that. Every lodge is responsible for its own structure, right? And the Grand Master is the head of a particular lodge. And the person who is responsible for the rituals and the ceremonies is called the worshipful master. Watch that term again. And that's why some Christian organizations have serious problems with that, because that's idolatry. But the Freemasons have a worshipful master. And when you are entering the lodge, even as a Christian, you have to bow before this worshipful master who is at the altar, which is his position is in the east, because they believe that the knowledge is coming from the east. And they say they don't worship the sun, but yet they have affiliations as to where the light is supposed to be coming from. And so you enter in darkness on the western side of the lodge, and you go to the east. So you're traveling from darkness to light. And imagine that. A Christian has to admit, and we will see that when we come to the initiation processes and those things, which we will get to a little later. You have to admit that you are coming from darkness and you are seeking the light. Imagine that. You will see what the Bible says about that, but that's what you have to be doing when you're entering the lodge and you're going through the initiation process. You are coming out of darkness and you have to, Christian or no Christian, you enter in that lodge and you want to become a Freemason. You have to admit that you are in darkness and you are seeking the light. So their concept of darkness is different from the biblical concept of darkness, and their concept of light is different from the biblical concept of light, which we will explore. All lodges worldwide have the same symbols, degrees, and teachings. There are slight variations, but again, that's another good thing about the lodge. There's a lot of harmony in lodges all over the world. And even though there's slight variations, there are fundamental things that they believe, fundamental rituals that they go through, and certain systems and practices that they have, and they are organized and structured in basically similar ways. And the church is fragmented and scattered and all sorts of different beliefs and all sorts of different things. And again, the Freemasons have something that they point to us that is better than what we have as Christians. Women are generally allowed in Masonry in Europe, but not in the United States. But this is beginning to change now. And the Order of the Eastern Star is one of the lodges in the States now, which admits both male and female. And then you have lodges now, and I should mention that in the history. The history was because the men were Masons, it started mainly with men. And because a lot of the black folk were enslaved or not free to move and were not incorporated, it was a Caucasian thing. So in the early stages of the lodges, and still to a large measure, the blacks were excluded and women were excluded. That's why you had the Prince Hall Freemasonry developing in the United States, because that was their answer to the exclusion of the blacks. So Prince Hall Freemasonry was established for the blacks. So a lot of some of the names I called just now were black people who were associated with the Prince Hall Freemasonry, and a lot of prominent black persons that are associated with the Prince Hall Freemasonry, which is one of the Freemasonries in Barbados that is one of the recent ones, because one of the persons that would have been introduced to it in the United States was brought over to Barbados. So the early lodges were the Grand Lodges that were established in England, but that one was mainly a black lodge established in the States, which became part of the lodge here. But now women are being involved in lodges. And I was seeing a clip just this evening of a lodge that has been established in Barbados now, called the Raphael Lodge number 7, I think it is. That is a lodge for the women, which has been recently established in Barbados. And in other parts of the world, they are all now incorporating young people. You see, because they realize that a movement has to attract young people. And before the age was 21, that you had to enter as a Mason. But now they have a lodge called the Order of Builders for boys. And then you have one called the Order of Job's Daughters, or the Order of the Rainbow. And that is for females. And that's for girls. See, they are now beginning to drop the age limit because they recognize that you have to bring younger people in, because before, most of the Masons were people 21 and over. All right. So point number 15, the Masonic man is expected to have fellowship with other Masons. He's expected to have high moral standards, kindness in his home, courtesy in society, honesty in business, and fairness in all his dealing. Very noble and very Christian. That's what the expectation is of those persons. But as Finney said, he went into a lodge where there were some very profane people. And as they realized too, that in many of the lodges, a lot of marriages break up, again, because of the connection that the men are having to the male, and sometimes neglecting their wives. And while they're expecting that they should have kindness in the home, a lot of the homes sometimes get broken up because men become Freemasons, and it creates problems in their relationships. Albert Pike, a prominent Mason, says Masonry deals more with man's relationship with his fellow man than his relationship with God. Imagine that. That's the man who wrote the Bible of Freemasonry. He said it's more about people fellowshipping with one another, man dealing with his fellow man, than his relationship with God. That is what is more important to the Freemason. All right, so those are all the points they have there, identifying some facts about Freemasonry. As I said, it incorporated some of their beliefs, their influence, their principles, the structure. So I'm going to pause at this point to see if you have any comments to make, any questions to ask, so we can learn some more, get a little deeper, and grasp what we need to grasp. Thank you so much, Alicia, for running the scrolls and giving us some of those photos that will give us a little look at the inside of the Freemasons. So talk to me.
Excuse me, Reverend Jackman, you have some questions
please.
here in the chat.
Okay.
So the first one says, does your research show that people are still drawn to Masonic lodges, that is young people? I thought it was maybe an older person's thing. That was the question, first question.
All right, it is realized that as more and more Christian groups come out against it and establish their position and discourage Christians from becoming part of it and exposing people to the realities of what is going on in lodge, the research actually indicating, or the statistics indicate that the lodge is declining. So it's not growing at the rate that it grew before, because by 1800, there were just about 300 lodges in England. And now there are 8,000 lodges. So you could see the rate at which the lodges grew. But they're saying now that there's, as I said, a decline, because countries are also coming out against it. There's a lot more investigation. Governments are becoming concerned about some of the things that are happening in relation to the influence of lodges in governmental systems. And there are some deviant things that have been associated. And so as people get more exposed to it, there might be a decline, but people are still joining, because remember, there are people who are more interested in material things than the spiritual things, and they want to progress. So if I'm a large person, I can advance in life. My large brothers are going to look out for me. They're going to support me, and I can get promotions. I can get exemptions from things that other people will have to answer for. And so you will still be getting connections, but it is reduced. In the place where the diaspora contain Muslims, that you have Muslims in England, you have Muslims in the United States and in parts of Europe, they're saying that the numbers in those places are still relatively large among the Muslims. But remember, they said there's a ban in a lot of the Arab countries, and so you can't have the lodges being established in those countries. So that is where you will get the decline. But where they have the, other countries where Muslims are free to have their own form of identity and involved in the things that they want to be involved in, it is still growing among Muslims. But I think fewer and fewer Christians are getting involved in the lodge, but it is still alarming that there's too significant a number of Christians. They say that about 25% of the leaders in the United States, among the 2 million they have, 25% are leaders in the churches of the Christians. 25%. That's a high percentage of Christian pastors and leaders in the Christian movement that are involved in Freemasonry. And you see, and that being the case, you're going to get a lot of Christians being influenced by the pastors and by the leaders. And we've got to be careful of that. We've got to let Christ be our leader and not get connected to people like as we are doing, because they can lead us in the wrong path. But overall, they are saying that the movement is slowing down. As I said, that's why the Masons are going to start. I don't think we have boys and the girls one here, but in other parts of the world, they're establishing those groups to influence or get younger people to become part of the lodge.
Okay, Reverend Jackman, you have two raised hands, and then there are two more questions in the chat. So you have Geraldine and Reverend Perry.
Okay.
Geraldine, you can go ahead. I'm not sure if you're on, right, you're now unmuted.
Yes. Even though research would have shown that they're declining in terms
Yes.
of persons signing up, I must say that they're becoming more prominent in our society.
In Barbados.
Persons are bold. Persons have become very bold. They're wearing the symbols on their chains, their vehicles, and they're a lot more powerful. You know that they're working with, and you're seeing it. And even though there is a decline, I believe that they're now targeting women. And I made sure to go ahead on this evening because for females that I know in the last year, they have joined and they've even have the emblems now on their vehicles. So I think that even though it is declining worldwide, I'm not sure what the statistics here will say because I've also seen symbols in our churches where persons actually wears the pendants or you see a ring, you manage to catch a glimpse of the ring. So even though it
Yes.
may be declining worldwide, they've become bolder in what they believe. And I believe the target has changed because one time it was predominantly men that they will
Correct.
target, but now women are now being targeted, as I said, over the past year, for females. And the question that the person placed in the chat made me chuckle because it's like younger people. The person who recently joined, she's only 27 years old. All right. So for me, that was startling. Yes, that's
Okay.
it.
Yes. Thank you very much. And as I said, there is a new lodge now recently established called the Pride of Raphael Lodge, number 10. They usually have a number attached to them. I saw the ceremony. I think they were celebrating an anniversary. And again, I won't call the church, but the service was held in an Anglican church, honoring the anniversary of this lodge now, which is predominantly um, a female lodge. So yes, they're opening up to females. Um, they are still mainly outnumbered by the male lodges, fraternities, but they're opening up. And as I said, it will come to point too where we might have a lodge for teenagers, boys and girls, like I mentioned in some of the other jurisdictions. They're having these lodges because they realize that they've got to attract young people. Like we as a church got to attract young people because old people are going off the scene. And most organizations recognize that. The last ship recognize that they got to attract young people. And so the lodges will begin to realize the same thing too. Okay, proceed.
Hi, good night, everybody.
Yes, sir.
Right. I recall when I was a wee lad that they were already in the lodge. And I'm talking about when I was on the 10th, so that's over 50, nearly 50 years ago or so. So they're not now focusing on women. Women have been a target for a long time. Just that
Yes, they were targeted up.
it was a secret lodge. A lot of these things were secretive. But like Geraldine's, and I was trying to figure out who that voice was, but I now realize it's Roseanne. That that is
Yes, please.
more open now, more open now. The point I wanted to make though, Pastor, in my research, um, this is quite some time ago though. Like you said, the beginning was really from the master builders of these cathedrals and everything else that were started in England and basically travel wherever the English put their feet. What I was not able to connect, but which I believe happened is that even though this was separate from the church, it because it was so closely aligned to the church, and a lot of these master builders and what have you were still part of the then English Catholic or the Anglican Church.
Yeah.
Christian, or shall I say it, spiritual things develop. What happened there is they became a mix of the religious
Hmm.
with worldly, and that's what makes it
Correct.
so deadly. Because, like a fellow that used to be part of the Church of God will often say that rat poison is 95% food,
That's
right?
correct.
But it's only 5% face poison, but it still can kill you. Um, what I am noticing, right, even
Hmm.
as we look at beyond that and we look at world history and the way the world is going,
Hmm.
the the corner from which the sinister threat comes from for me is politics. Um,
Correct.
and
Correct.
I believe that we are seeing more politicians align themselves with the church for political ends. And it's not yet in Barbados, so that let me be clear, I'm not saying that it's happening in Barbados, but I'm seeing it happening, especially with the politics that we're seeing played out in the US, where and I'm not afraid to say this. I know there's some Trump lovers here in Barbados, but where we see the Republican Party, which is supposed to be the Christian party, embracing a lot of politics and being very embroiled in politics and seeing politics as a means to push the Christian agenda. While that may be a noble thought, it will be a destructive practice. And I hope that we will put up rails here in Barbados and don't let that happen, because I'm not a prophet or son of a prophet, even though sometimes I think I am a prophet. That is going to be destructive if we allow anything, our Christianity, to become contaminated by anything at all. We have to keep it pure. That's my thought.
Correct. Correct. And I agree with that very much. And it's not only politics, but you are very right. Because in United States, Freemasonry got involved in politics from very, very early. Remember, he said George Washington, the early president, and then 14 other presidents were Freemasons. And they say, I think when the United States Constitution was being drafted, of the 68 persons working on the Constitution, I think about 18 of them were Freemasons. And so built in political system already is an influence of Freemasonry, and they're behind the New World Order. If you look at the US $1 bill, it has the all-seeing eye at the back of it, and the triangle which represents its connection to Egypt. That is sort of
It's
occultic
Freemason.
symbolism, but they
And,
say
and
that represents God. That represents God overshadowing the US. All right, but you see, people always say what they want you to believe.
Look, let me butt in there because you're
Yeah,
making a good point. But it
yes,
also, the as you call it, the syncretism, and you see the words
yes,
in God we trust, but you're still seeing the all-seeing eye of Osiris.
yes.
So
In God we
it's very
trust.
cynical and very. We have to be careful. Huh? Keep the Christianity
Very,
pure.
very careful. And then they got the Latin inscription, New World Order. You see how many presidents are talking New World Order? Watch the move again to make Christianity, make their organization universal. You draw everybody in, right? And this is part of the New World Order, to bring everybody under one, where we're talking about the movement towards the Antichrist and one world government. In subtle ways, Freemasonry is behind a lot of that. And folks that got the power to do it. There are other secret organizations which I didn't research because that's not what we're dealing with, but they're connected. The Illuminati, the Skull and Bones, the Bilderberg, all of these are, well, they're more private organizations. They're not as open to people entering them as the lodges, but they've got connections, and they all meet and formulate things that affect economics, affect political appointments in places and things like that. And folks, you really begin to believe how powerful and influential these people are. That's why Christians cannot get to dabble in it, because you be forming part of a system that is going to be anti-Christ, it's going to be against Christ, it's going to be against what God stands for, and you're helping to build up that system, but you don't know because only 20% of the people go on to higher degrees know all these things, but the 80% of the Masons who remain down to the level of the Grand, the Mason, the Grand Master, they don't know these things, and they feel they are not exposed to know really what is going on, and they feel comfortable in these things. Now, I don't really believe that we got many people in Church of God connected to that. We are sounder than that, and we are more established. But in case you are thinking about it, let me tell you, because it is very attractive, and when people know that they can get financial support, you know how much money Freemasons put into things, into people's businesses and developing them, and pulling them out of deep situations and all that. People want that because people, and that's what the Bible says, don't love the world or the things that are in the world. Because if you love the world, the love of the Father are not in you. But these things are attractive to the flesh part of man. And even Christians get deceived by that. And that's the reason why so many people are in it. You got a lot of ministers of, again, I call it the denominations, but you got ministers in certain religious groupings that are part of the Freemason, and they justify it. And they tell the people, well, we believe in God and we are about brotherhood, we about love and fellowship. These are things Jesus is about. But you see, again, those are things that they talk to you about in the first 3 degrees. And if that's where you are, and a lot of people in Barbados are 33 degrees, as a matter of fact, I don't know if they go, there are only 33-degree Masons in Barbados. I got to investigate that. But there's not a lot of statistical data and information, because I try my best to get some statistics, like how many religious people are in the lodge, what are the numbers in the lodges. They ain't giving you that information. You know the names of some of the lodges, right? And they got lodges all over the place. And the one big one here you got in St. George, that is a meeting place for other lodges coming together because they unite, you know. And when you get to a certain level, you can move between lodges. As an entered apprentice, you can't do it. So they have some person at the door who is called a Tyler, Tyler, goes back to the same thing that they did when they had the small lodges developing in way back then when the Masons used to meet together for their little club meetings and whatnot. They had somebody at the door to keep out intruders. The Masons today still have somebody at the door called a Tyler. So nobody can just enter the lodge, especially when they have their meetings. They keep you out. They keep you out, and the Tyler is there to investigate, to see who can enter the lodge, what is your status, and whether you can get in there. So nobody can just walk in a lodge. You can't just walk in that lodge at St. George up there on the hill. All right. Some more questions. We still have some time.
Reverend Jackman, before you move on.
Yes, please.
What is the significance of the knock? Knock on the door.
You know?
Yeah.
But it's part of their ritual. I got to check to see what signifies, but you're not 3 times. And 3, the numbers 3, 5, and 7 are very symbolic in Freemasonry because how it connects. 3 times could be connected to the 3 degrees that you're going to be experiencing as you enter the lodge. Because when you enter the lodge, you are going to be entering what you call a craft lodge. That's in the British system. So we are part of the British system. So it's called a craft lodge in Barbados. It's called a blue lodge in United States. But everybody that enters that lodge has to go through 3 degrees. You can decide where you want to move further up the ladder, and then you got to get connected with other appendant organizations like the York Rite or the Scottish Rite, which give you more information and take you through more rituals, and you improve in degrees. So the knock 3 times could be the symbolic of the 3 that represent the 3 stages which you are now entering to go through: the apprentice, the craft mason, and the grand master. So you knock 3 times.
Okay,
I will go through some of those things. I will go through some of those things when you go to the rituals and the belief systems, which we will look at in the next session.
Yeah, but they say to you, knock. I remember speaking to a lady, and she said, knock, and it will be open to you.
Good.
So
Yes.
if you don't make the right kind of knock, she said, if you don't make the right kind of knock, the door will not be open to you. There's a, as you're saying, the knock. So That's why I'm asking the significantly not, and well, you may not know the right way to knock, but she was saying to me, once you knock the right way, because I was asking her, how would I become a member of your organization? All she did say to me, you have to come and knock, and the door can be open onto you. And she just left it there. So I couldn't get the information from her as to what she was saying. So she just told me knock, and the door can be open onto you.
All right. You see, that's why they have secrets, because there are certain things that they want to reveal to everybody. After we get the next question, I will let Alicia run the short video that we have showing you how you get involved in the lodge, how you get connected, all right? Because they want you to see that. It's just about 6 minutes. So we'll get the next question in, and then we'll run it for that 6 minutes.
Good night.
Good night.
No, I get late. I come in late, but anybody talk about the ring?
I mentioned the ring and the symbol that the ring has on, right? But you don't just get the ring as you enter. You got to go through the degrees first, and then you'll be awarded the ring. If you want it before you accomplish the 3 degrees, you can purchase the ring, because you see the ring identifies you. So when you move about the place and you got that ring, you don't have to make any signs, or you don't have to have any special handshake. Your ring says you are a Mason, and your Masons, your fellow Mason will identify you. And if you need help, if you need the assistance in any way, they are sworn to give you assistance as long as it does not risk their life. Okay?
Okay.
So the ring. All right, so let's see here in this 6-minute presentation some of the things that
Joining a Masonic
Remember
lodge is a
again,
process steeped
3:47.
in tradition and symbolism, reflecting centuries-old rituals that emphasize personal growth, community involvement, and ethical development. Freemasonry is a fraternal organization that aims to promote moral and intellectual advancement through its teachings and practices. While the specifics might vary slightly from one jurisdiction to another, the general steps to join a Masonic lodge can be outlined as follows. Interest and inquiry. The first step in joining a Masonic lodge is expressing genuine interest. Potential candidates often learn about Masonry through family connections, friends, or research. Masonic lodges are not secretive, but certain aspects of their ceremonies are reserved for initiates. Aspiring members should research the values of a Freemason, their history, and expectations before pursuing membership. Finding a lodge. Locate a Masonic lodge in your area. You can use online resources, contact local lodges, or inquire with Masons you know to find information about lodges near you. Each lodge is part of a larger Masonic jurisdiction, and jurisdictional rules and requirements may vary. Submitting an application. Once you've identified a lodge that aligns with your interests, you will need to submit an application for membership. The application typically requires basic personal information, including your background and reasons for seeking membership. It's important to provide accurate information and show a genuine desire to join. Initial interview. After submitting your application, you'll likely be invited for an interview with lodge members. This is an opportunity for both parties to get to know each other better. The interview may cover your motivations for joining, your understanding of Freemasonry, and your willingness to uphold its principles. Investigation and committee review. Masonic lodges often have an investigating committee that assesses your suitability for membership. This committee may conduct background checks and speak to references to ensure that you uphold the values of Freemasonry and are of good character. Lodge vote. After the investigation, your application will be presented to the lodge members for a vote. Masonic lodges operate democratically, and a favorable vote is typically required for membership. The vote ensures that the membership is in agreement with your admission and that you have a genuine interest in the organization's principles. Initiation. If your application is approved, you'll be invited to attend an initiation ceremony, often referred to as an entered apprentice degree. This ceremony is a profound and symbolic experience, emphasizing personal growth, enlightenment, and moral development. It serves as an introduction to Masonic teachings and values. Degrees and progression. Following the initiation, you'll progress through a series of degrees, each with its own ceremonies and lessons. These degrees include the Fellow Craft degree and the Master Mason degree. Each degree imparts unique teachings and allegorical lessons that encourage self-improvement and ethical conduct. Continued learning and involvement. Freemasonry places a strong emphasis on personal growth and continuous learning. Members are encouraged to participate in lodge activities, engage in discussions, and further their understanding of Masonic principles. Many lodges offer educational programs, lectures, and events that provide opportunities for members to deepen their knowledge. Community engagement and charity. Masonic lodges are actively involved in charitable endeavors and community service projects. Becoming a member means contributing to these initiatives and embodying the principles of charity and benevolence. Freemasonry seeks to make a positive impact on both its members and the wider community. Lodge leadership and advancement. As you become more involved in your lodge, you may have the opportunity to take on leadership roles or participate in lodge governance. Advancement within Freemasonry is not only about personal growth, but also about contributing to the well-being of the lodge and its members. Further degrees and orders. Beyond the three main degrees, most Masonic jurisdictions offer additional degrees and orders that provide further insight into Masonic teachings and history. These are optional and may require further commitment and study. Lifelong journey. Joining a Masonic lodge is not just about completing a series of steps, it's a commitment to a lifelong journey of self-improvement, ethical conduct, and community involvement. Freemasonry offers a supportive and engaging environment for members to explore deeper aspects of themselves and their role in society. In conclusion, the process of joining a Masonic lodge involves expressing genuine interest, researching lodges, submitting an application, undergoing an interview and investigation, being voted upon by the members, participating in initiation ceremonies and degree progression, engaging in ongoing learning and community involvement, and potentially taking on leadership roles within the lodge. Freemasonry's rich history, values, and commitment to personal growth make it an intriguing path for those seeking to cultivate a deeper understanding of themselves and their place in the world.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alicia. Now you see, that seems very, very noble, very, very attractive. And you are drawn into it. Now, next week, please don't miss next week, because next week is going to get very deep, because we have to look at the rituals that they go through, and you will see what Christians are submitting themselves to, and the oaths they are making. And we will see what the Bible says about the oaths. We look at the belief systems that they have, and we look at what the initiation processes. We examine those belief systems in the light of what the word is saying, because that's the important thing. All of what we do have to come in alignment with the word of God. We're not accepting vain philosophies and beautiful things that people put forward that sound nice and attractive. We measure things, as Wendell said in his presentation, the Bible is our rule of faith, and Christ alone is Lord. So we measure everything in the light of all of that. I was looking through some names, just an aside, of some Grand Masters and lodges. And I saw the name pop up in front of me, William Maynard, and I straightened up my body because it jumped me. And I said William Maynard, but when I look at the year, it was 1755. but I just mentioned that, by the way. So you got a William Maynard all the way back in that period of time. All right, so unless there are other questions that you have or statements you want to make, as I say, I'm going to try to keep with the time that we have allocated, but I am open if you want to ask some questions at this point in time or make statements to entertain that for a few more minutes.
Okay. Yes, sir. I will be brief in this one.
Mhm.
You mentioned already you stated that you're not sure if if there are any 33 degrees persons in Barbados.
Barbados. Yeah, if I was looking for Nancy.
For sure there have been, because when I was working at Light and Power, I had a regular meeting every Tuesday with one. And he and I, we would
Okay.
talk and compare Christian beliefs with Masonic beliefs. And the things that he would say to me
Mm-hmm.
would simply blow your mind, really.
Yeah.
I don't think I had not I don't know. I was not at Bible school as yet, because I went to Bible school in 91, and I worked there in 90 and back again in 92. But he would say things to me like the there was an Airbus in existence at the time of Egypt. So in the time of the flood, Airbus meaning an airplane. At the time
Mm-hmm.
of people were carried away from that area and settled in an area where they want to die. So that's how the world got repopulated. It wasn't just no, I mean, Noah and his sons and their wives and his wife. And secondly, you mentioned that there are symbols and handshakes, but they're also words. They're
Yes.
also
Yes.
words
Right.
that
Their
are
words.
spoken.
Their words.
So,
Correct.
so conversation, a Mason would say things,
Yes.
and if you do not respond, he will know that you're not a Mason. And the words
Correct.
are secret codes, especially to, like if you want to be in a crowd, speak, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
well, let me say I can say right now that I don't know if this is an apocryphal story or not, but I've heard, and this was long before I joined the legal fraternity. I heard of someone standing up before a judge or a magistrate and saying a few words, and that was enough.
Mm-hmm.
That was enough to get favor.
Yeah.
Uh, so those stories that were there, but
Yeah, but
again,
you are right.
the word they speak about esoteric knowledge, which is anti-Bible, because the Bible is not secretive. Christ did not
No,
come
it is a
in secret; he came openly, and when he returns, even though the Bible says he's going to come like a thief in the night, it doesn't mean he's going to come in secret either, because it says all eyes shall see him, behold him. So therefore, we ought to know that anything that is secret is antichrist, because God is light, which means he's available for all to see, and there's no darkness in him. That's my
correct. Correct.
contribution.
Correct. And we will look at some of those signs and symbols and words. Like a pastor say he was traveling one time, and this guy, if you want to you find out if you're a Mason, he said, "Are you a traveling man?" Remember, I told you that your journey is moving from the west to the east. So it says that you're on a journey traveling from the west to the east. So if you are a Freemason, you understand that. So when the guy asked him, "Are you a traveling man?" He said, "I've gone as far as Yellowstone Park." And he said the guy shake his head and walk away because he knows directly that he is not a Mason because he don't understand what it means to be a traveling man. That question, if you're a traveling man, if you are a Freemason, you will know it means that you are traveling. You are on a journey from the west to the east, from darkness to light. So you're right. And I will mention some of those words as some distress symbols that you can use and words. Because if you don't, nobody spots your symbol, there's certain words you can say, and a Freemason who is in a place that he can hear you will know that this is a brother that is in distress, and I got to go to his rescue. So you are right. And as I said, those are things we're going to look at. It's going to get a little deep. So, but again, we are focusing on the word, and you will see how you cannot be a Christian really and be involved in Freemasonry. Not if you're serious and you trust the word of God as your authority and you are obedient to that. So bring your Bibles next week because we will be looking at some scripture. We look at initiation process and some of the rituals, and you will have to wonder why. How can a Christian repeat a ritual like that, or go through an oath, make an oath like that, and it's connected to Christ? See, so these are things that we want to expose, so that no Christian that are in the hearing of our voice would think about Freemasonry, and if he's in it, he would do what Charles Finney did when he became a Christian: get out of it. and he wrote and he exposed it because it was darkness. And we need to expose darkness. And that's what we're trying to do, to keep our people in the light, because that's where the illumination comes, in the light. So that's it from me for tonight.